Imagine that within each person there's a hidden switch, a mechanism that lies silent for decades until one day it flips. This moment occurs around the time a person turns 80. Many people think that old age is simply a gradual decline, a little less energy, worse sleep, weaker muscles, but in reality, something far more profound and astonishing is happening. The body is restructuring itself. It seems to switch to a completely different operating mode, beginning to follow new biological laws that neither the clinic nor the tests will tell you about. After 8 decades of continuous work, the body doesn't break down, as is commonly believed. It adapts. It chooses survival over productivity. Every organ, every cell, every system within us receives new instructions and begins to function differently. This is why many changes after 80 seem mysterious or frightening. They occur not gradually but abruptly, as if someone has rewritten a person's internal programming. Research shows that every body goes through 5 key biological thresholds, and these changes occur in everyone without exception, regardless of whether you were an athlete in your youth, a healthy lifestyle enthusiast, or simply lived an ordinary life. Taste changes, skin loses its memory. The brain rewires signaling pathways, muscles begin to overuse themselves, and the internal clock gets thrown off balance, causing night and day to switch places. In this video, we'll break down step by step what exactly happens in the human body after 80, why these processes occur, and what can be done to mitigate their impact. You'll understand. Old age isn't a decline, but a complex stage in the body's evolution, and each of us has the opportunity to navigate it mindfully, maintaining clarity, strength, and quality of life. So, let's start with the first characteristic, the one that affects the sensation of the world literally through taste. The first signs that the body has transitioned to a new biological regime are taste and smell. We rarely consider how powerfully the sense of taste anchors us in the world of the familiar and pleasant. But after age 80, this foundation begins to quietly crumble. Research shows that by this age, a person loses up to 70% of their taste buds. They literally dry up, stop renewing themselves, and no longer transmit the same powerful signals to the brain. What was once rich, aromatic, and vibrant is now perceived as flat and monotonous. Taste weakens not because a person stopped liking food, but because the tongue's cells no longer regenerate as they once did. But the problem goes much deeper than simply enjoying food. Taste buds are a protective barrier. They warn us about bitter, spoiled, and over-salted foods. And when this system fails, a person begins to unconsciously add more salt, sugar, and spices, trying to restore the lost sensation of satiety. Unfortunately, this poses a direct health threat: blood pressure spikes, diabetes risk, and chronic dehydration. But that's not all. 80% of taste perception depends on the sense of smell. And after 80, smell begins to fade even faster than taste buds. Almost half of people at this age experience partial or complete loss of smell. This means the world becomes less vibrant, less alive. And along with this, important cues fade. The smell of smoke, gas, and spoiled food becomes almost undetectable. I remember the story of an elderly woman, a former chef. She said, "I don't recognize my own recipes anymore." Tasting, one of the greatest joys in her life, had become a matter of guessing. Is it sweet or not? Is it salty or bland? This isn't a whim or fatigue. It's physiology, rewritten by age. When food stops bringing joy, appetite decreases. Older people begin to eat less and lose strength, which triggers a chain of other problems: weakness, deficiencies, and weakened immunity. Taste isn't just a pleasure. It's a mechanism that helps the body survive. But it's important to remember, just because taste fades doesn't mean it's gone forever. There are ways to restore flavor and interest to food, and we'll definitely discuss them later. For now, let's move on to the next amazing change that occurs in the body after 80, and it concerns the body's largest organ, the skin. When a person reaches 80, one of the most unexpected changes is that their skin begins to behave differently. It doesn't just become thinner or drier, that's expected. It seems to lose its memory, its ability to properly respond to damage. Where a small scratch would once heal in a couple of days, the same scar can now linger for weeks. And it's not a matter of vitamins or immunity. It's that the skin cells themselves forget how to regenerate. Scientists call this phenomenon cellular amnesia. Fibroblasts, the cells responsible for collagen production and wound healing, no longer receive clear instructions. Their genetic repair map is erased over time. They begin to work more slowly, more erratically, and sometimes fail to reach the desired area at all. This isn't just a slowdown in regeneration, it's a loss of coordination, a loss of an algorithm that has worked reliably for decades. The situation is exacerbated by the thinning of the skin itself. By age 80, it becomes 20% thinner. Subcutaneous blood vessels also lose elasticity, so any pressure, even the slightest touch, can cause a bruise. Many people feel they've become too fragile, but this isn't fragility, but a weakening of the inner protective layers. When blood vessels burst more easily and the skin becomes thinner, bruises appear literally out of thin air. One of my patients, an 83-year-old woman, once showed me a tiny cut on her finger and said, "It hasn't healed for 3 weeks." And indeed, her blood tests were normal, her sugar levels were normal, and there were no infections. It was just that her cells had lost the ability to quickly and consistently close the wound. It was as if they were confused, forgetting their job. Another problem is that the skin is the body's first line of defense. If it doesn't heal well, the risk of infection increases exponentially. Even a small cut can cause inflammation because immune cells reach the damaged area too slowly, while microbes reach it too quickly. But it's important to emphasize here, even though skin slows down, it never stops trying to recover. And proper care really does help speed up the process. Moisturizing, nourishing creams, vitamins, sun protection, and proper nutrition. All of this works. Aging skin isn't a sign of weakness. It's a signal that the body needs more support, more attention, and a little more time. And if given the right conditions, it can still recover. Now let's move on to the next stage. What happens not to the body's surface, but to its central control system? What happens to the brain after 80 may surprise even those who think they know everything about aging. When a person reaches 80, a process begins in their brain that can be compared to the renovation of a huge city. Imagine a metropolis where some bridges have fallen into disrepair, roads have become too narrow, and some streets are completely blocked. But traffic must continue, and so the city begins to look for alternative routes. This is precisely what the brain does in later life. It rebuilds its roots, creates new connections, and tries to bypass damaged areas to maintain functionality for as long as possible. By this age, a person loses up to 20% of their white matter, the neural pathways that transmit signals between brain regions. The old communication system can no longer cope, and the brain is forced to literally rewrite its own architecture. It creates new pathways, forcing neighboring neurons to take over the functions of those that have died. This is an amazing example of adaptation, but it also has side effects. This is why an elderly person might suddenly forget why they entered a room or search for the right word longer than usual. This isn't a sign of degradation, it's a consequence of the signal taking a new, longer, and less direct route. It's as if you were driving the same route you've always taken, but now you're passing through 3 intersections and a detour. Interestingly, during this restructuring process, the brain begins to prioritize emotional memories. Old, vivid moments become more accessible than recent events. A person might recall in detail the smell of their grandmother's kitchen as a child, but forget what they had for breakfast that day. This isn't a quirk of memory, it's a shift in priority. Emotional memory is stronger, so it's retained longer. But there's a downside. When trying to create new connections, so-called micro-glitches can occur. A person might suddenly fall silent, forgetting a thought mid-sentence, or lose the thread of a conversation for a second. This isn't a disease, but a temporary overload, like a traffic light on a new road that hasn't been adjusted yet, and traffic slows down slightly. Nevertheless, such a brain is still capable of learning, remembering, and creating new things. It just requires more time and calm. Any mental activity, talking, reading, attention games, helps strengthen newly constructed pathways. So when an elderly person forgets the name of an acquaintance, it's not a weakness, but the work of a vast mechanism that restructures itself to continue functioning. The brain doesn't give up. It adapts. Now let's move on to a part of the body that comes under even more serious pressure in old age. Muscles, our internal engines, experience changes that are far more dramatic than they seem at first glance. When a person reaches 80, one of the most profound and dangerous processes unfolds within the muscles. At first glance, everything seems simple. Muscles become weaker, strength diminishes, and movement becomes more difficult. But beneath the surface, something far more dramatic occurs. The body switches to energy conservation mode and begins using muscle tissue as a fuel source. This phenomenon is called sarcopenia, and its scale shocks even doctors. With age, the balance between muscle fiber breakdown and regeneration shifts. A young body readily builds new cells, but after 80, this ability drops to virtually zero. Hormonal levels decline. Testosterone, estrogen, and growth hormone levels decrease. Protein absorption declines. Then the body makes the logical choice. It begins to disassemble its own muscles, converting them into energy to support vital organs. This is why a person might complain not of fatigue, but of a feeling of emptiness. One of my patients described it this way: "Doctor, I'm not tired. I feel like I'm becoming hollow." This is an accurate description of what's happening. The body is literally using muscle tissue as a reserve fuel source, burning through its own supports for the sake of survival. The effects of these changes are felt in every movement. A person loses balance, becomes less sure-footed, and trips more often. This isn't due to poor coordination, but because the leg muscles lose mass the fastest. Research shows that losing just 10% of the lower extremity muscles can double the risk of fatal falls over the next few years. Furthermore, muscles are a vital reservoir of amino acids essential for immunity and brain function. When muscles become depleted, the body is deprived of the building blocks needed to repair tissue, fight infections, and synthesize neurotransmitters. Therefore, older adults with severe sarcopenia are more likely to experience inflammation, slow wound healing, mood swings, and even brain fog. But there's a silver lining. Muscles remain remarkably responsive even after 80. Every walk, every light weightlifting session, every serving of protein sends a signal to the body. Muscles are needed, they can't be wasted. And the body responds. Muscles can be partially restored, their loss slowed, and their functionality restored, if you give them a stimulus. Sarcopenia isn't a death sentence, but a warning. And if you recognize it early, you can maintain strength, mobility, and independence for years to come. Now it remains to talk about the most mysterious and perhaps the most important change. How, after 80 years, our internal life clock begins to tick in the other direction, confusing night and day. Of all the changes that occur after 80, the most subtle at first glance is sleep. But it has one of the most profound effects on health, mood, and mental clarity. Many older people complain of waking up at 3 or 4 a.m., falling asleep after lunch, and by evening feeling as if they've been through 2 shifts in a row. This is often dismissed as age-related insomnia, but in reality, it's much deeper. The body has a master time conductor, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a small cluster of neurons in the center of the brain. It controls the circadian rhythm, when we feel alert, when we're tired, when the body needs to renew itself, and when it needs to work. Until age 80, this system is relatively stable, but after that, it begins to lose precision. The reason is that the eyes, which transmit information about daylight hours to the brain, no longer capture light as effectively. The amount of light reaching the internal receptors decreases, and the brain begins to receive distorted signals about the time of day. This leads to a shift in the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone. People begin to fall asleep earlier, wake up earlier, and their wake-rest cycles become fragmented. But more importantly, disrupted sleep stops fulfilling its primary function, cleansing the brain. During deep sleep, the glymphatic system literally flushes metabolic waste from the brain, including proteins associated with the risk of dementia. When sleep becomes shallow and intermittent, this cleansing is disrupted. This results in morning heaviness, forgetfulness, and irritability. Yet even here, the body demonstrates a remarkable ability to adapt. In one case, an 82-year-old woman reported feeling as if her day and night had been reversed. She would fall asleep after breakfast and stay awake in the dark. An examination revealed that her rhythm had indeed shifted by almost 6 hours. But through regular daylight walks, soft evening light, and a strict diet, her internal clock was gradually restored to normal. Sleep disturbances in old age are not a sign of weakness or a death sentence. They are a signal that the body needs more daylight, less bright light in the evening, more movement, and a little external support to regain its natural circadian rhythm. Sleep isn't just rest. It's the brain's last defense mechanism, continuing to fight for health even when other systems have slowed down. Understanding this helps you not only sleep better, but also maintain mental clarity for years to come.